Welcome to another Buy Low Fantasy Sports Show with Mitch and Bam. I'm Mitch. He's Bam. Bam, say hello to the people.
Hello, lovely people.
Today we're going to be talking fantasy football sleepers. We've got 70 something percent of all drafts going on this weekend. And we wanted to get our sleepers out to you guys so that y'all can make the best decision possible on the values in your fantasy football drafts. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump over to Bam to give us his first sleeper.
Yeah, first sleeper I'm looking at is wide receiver John Smokey Brown over there smoking those cigarettes up in Buffalo. He's a
Smoking
deep
some kind of cigarette.
smoking some wacky ones hopefully. He's a deep threat, had a great camp. He's really developed a rapport with Allen according to the beat writers. And Josh Allen, the quarterback of the Bills, he's only good at two things, the deep ball and rushing. And Smokey is really good at catching those deep balls. So when he's running around those broken plays, Smokey could really add some value, catch maybe double-digit touchdowns.
Has Josh Allen ever thrown double-digit touchdowns at any point in his career? So this is my counterpoint to John Smokey Brown. Don't forget, this Buffalo Bills offense is not very good. So with that being said, pick your spots where you're going to play John Smokey Brown. Don't overhype him. Don't overreach to grab him. He's a guy that's going to get you some pop games throughout the season, but he's not going to be a consistent performer on a week-to-week basis. He may be a good guy to fill in for injuries. Maybe if you've got a top wide receiver that gets injured for a week or two, John Smokey Brown's going to give you a little bit of value there, but I wouldn't put him in my lineup on a week-to-week basis.
Right, yeah, he's a guy that you can, for pop games, especially for daily fantasy players, he's a guy you need to watch out for this year and make sure you have him in a lineup every week because he'll have those big pop games. So who you got as your big sleeper there?
My sleeper is a guy that's probably going to get you somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 catches a week. And he is none other than wide receiver Adam Humphries from the Tennessee Titans. Now, he could be gotten in the 14th round of most fantasy drafts. He's the new slot receiver. He's the new kind of, I don't want to call him a gadget play, but he's going to get those 6 to 10 yard catches that he may be able to pop one every now and then, take it to the house, score you a couple touchdowns. Already developed a little bit of rapport with Mariota. Could see 100 targets this season, maybe push up into 120, 130. But he's going to get that, like I said, the 6 to 10 targets that I think he'll produce. Maybe not big every week, but I think he's going to be a guy that can get you 7, 8, 9, 10 points on a weekly, consistent basis. And then there will be the pop games. He'll break one for maybe he'll break one for 40 or 50 yards, score you a touchdown.
Sure, and he's never really been a big touchdown guy, so and we don't know what his red zone role might be. So he might get a red zone role there with Mariota. We don't know, but this guy's especially valuable in PPR leagues, I think, where instead of that 8 to 10 you get in half PPR or standard, this is a guy that can be a consistent 12 to 13 points every week.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's important to note, though, that Mariota is not a very consistent quarterback, much like Josh Allen. I think he's more consistent than Josh Allen, but I think he'll be a guy that kind of that Cole Beasley role player for you. Great injury fill in, great bye week guy, something along those lines. But who else you got, Bam?
I want to look at the Bears passing game in the late round, specifically Mitch Trubisky and Anthony Miller. Mitch Trubisky, a guy who's going in the 13th round for some reason, and Anthony Miller's going the 11th. Trubisky had a breakout year last year, even with missing a few games towards the end of the season. And he's looking to improve even more the second year in this Nagy offense. Also, Trubisky has that rushing upside, which is huge for a fantasy QB. So he's a guy, 13th round, gets you some extra value with that rushing upside. Now, Anthony Miller, he's a guy that separated his shoulder 5 times last year, and he still managed to catch 7 TDs on only 32 receptions. So this guy had a lot of potential.
Five
He's
times?
yeah, separated his shoulder 5 times.
Good grief.
and he even put it back in one game and then separated again. And this so separated twice in one game against Detroit, I believe. So he's obviously a tough kid. He's a mismatch nightmare in the slot, and I think he could push for 100+ targets in this offense, especially with Coach Nagy saying they're going to put less emphasis on those gadget plays with Taylor Gabriel and Tariq Cohen. So that means more production for Taylor Gabriel, hopefully.
Yeah, Trubisky's a guy I really love. I have him as my number 7 quarterback in my rankings. He's a guy that offers that rushing upside, like you said, that makes quarterbacks so valuable, rushing quarterbacks so valuable in fantasy production. But so if he finishes top 7, then somebody has to catch the ball. We all know about A-Rob. We all know about Trey Burton, right? Anthony Miller could be a guy that you're able to grab. He's probably not going to produce those high numbers in the first few weeks of the season. He's dealing with an ankle injury after dealing with shoulder surgery in the offseason. So he hasn't practiced a whole lot. So I don't like him in those first few weeks. But if you do draft him in the 11th round, I think you're getting good value there. Just kind of temper your expectations the first 4 or 5, maybe even 6 weeks of the season, because at some point this season he is going to produce for you.
Sure, yeah, he's a guy that could definitely go on a tear at some point. We've seen slot guys before just go nuts, especially when the matchup is right. So who you got as another sleeper?
So much like you did quarterback Mitch Trubisky and Anthony Miller, I'm going to look at 2 guys that kind of go together, and that's Jimmy Garoppolo, the Gruffalo as I call him, in the 49ers passing offense, along with Marquise Goodwin, guy I lovingly refer to as Goody. Now, Jimmy G and Goody, these are 2 guys that I think really are going to take the next step this year. Again, they're probably going to be better towards the middle part of the season because of the fact that Jimmy G is coming back off of injury. He didn't play the all of last year. And Marquise Goodwin, he's just an awesome talent. I think he graded out as the fastest player in the NFL. So this is an offense that's going overlooked, and I don't understand why, because there's a lot of weapons here. You have Dante Pettis. You have Tevin Coleman that came over from the Falcons, very familiar with Shanahan's offense. I think this Niners offense could be the best they've had in a number of years.
Possibly. Jimmy G has looked like crap in camp. So you're right to say temporary expectations a bit. But there's a lot of talent here. It might take him a few weeks to gel. Definitely a team that around week 5, week 6, I'm probably looking to pick up on waivers if they're there, if I didn't get a chance to draft them, for sure.
Yeah, and these are guys. I think once you're working this far down into the draft, I think you're looking for guys that can provide that pop value for you. And so as we move into rounds 11, 12, 13, 14, you're going to be looking for guys that are backups, or you missed on some of your higher ranked guys in the earlier rounds. And so these may be guys that if they do explode later on in the season, then you have that productivity without spending that draft capital to pay up at wide receiver, quarterback, etc. So the next part of the segment, we're going to talk about tight ends, a couple undrafted tight ends, and Bam's going to take over on that.
Yeehaw. Well, tight end's always a difficult position to figure out. And if you're a guy that likes to draft running backs early, you could miss a lot of those big tight ends. Or if you want to take more wide receivers in the mid rounds, you could miss a lot of the starting tight ends. So I think here's 2 guys I think provide some value, even though they're going undrafted, both of them. You got Darren Waller from the Raiders. He's an athletic freak, similar in that Evan Ingram from the Giants type model, guy that can play over the field. And he's inheriting Jared Cook's role at tight end. Cook, of course, left, went to New Orleans. Leaves behind about 100 targets and 16 red zone targets in this Raider offense. Waller could see similar volume, I think, with AB acting crazy and that bad and banged up O-line that the Raiders have. And then Will Dissly, he's coming off a patellar tendon injury, but he's impressed in camp. He had a breakout in the first 4 weeks last year. He won somebody the Millie Maker on DraftKings in somebody's lineup. He had a 2-touchdown game. Also, Offensive coordinator Schottenheimer loves him. And another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about early part of the season, pay attention to injuries. The Seahawks wide receiver core is pretty beat up right now. You got David Moore, who might miss the first couple weeks, and you got Metcalf, the rookie wide receiver, could miss the first couple weeks. Naturally, a lot of those targets will funnel to Tyler Lockett and maybe Chris Carson too if he's catching passes. But if defense is designed to shut those down, that gives Will Dissly a chance to pop in those first few weeks, provided he's healthy as well.
Yeah, I really love both of these guys. With Waller being such a athletic freak, he's going to be able to take over, especially with Antonio Brown. Right. So if Antonio Brown is pulling so much of the defense's attention towards his side of the field, that's going to open up other opportunities. I like Tyrell Williams for this reason, but Waller is going to give you the even more value because of the fact that he's going undrafted. So if you're grabbing him in the 15th, 16th round, why not, right? Yeah, I mean, some fools are going to be drafting a kicker or a defense there. I'm drafting guys that I think may be able to produce for me on my actual roster. And so Waller is a guy that I think could be left wide open. And, of course, Derek Carr, he's not the most accurate quarterback. So, yeah, you kind of have to pick and choose when you're going to play Waller. Same with Disley. The Seahawks defense isn't real great yet. There's been a lot of turnover there, uh, a lot of people retiring, a lot of people moving on, whatever the case may be. And so Seahawks are going to have to pass more this season. That opens up some opportunities, especially with those other wide receivers injured. It's going to open up a little bit more opportunity for him there.
For sure. And you got to pay attention to the draft strategy too that we've talked about, and we'll talk about more in this next segment, which is critical. Most critical part of the draft, I think, is how you're going to back up. You're going to pick these handcuffs and these backup running backs. So, Mitch, walk us through how you're going to attack handcuffing some of these big running backs.
It's important to understand as we're drafting in the early part of the draft in the early rounds that we're going to be taking guys that we expect to have big workloads, right? We're taking our Todd Gurley's, we're taking our Leonard Fournette's, our Dalvin Cooks. And so as we're drafting those guys, we have to remember that we're investing a lot of draft capital in them, right? First, second, maybe early third rounders, right? And so we're spending a lot of capital getting these guys. The downside of that is the running back position is one of the most volatile in the NFL. And so we want to make sure that we're getting handcuffs. We're picking up the backup running backs for guys that we think may be more injury prone, especially as we're talking about those high draft capital picks. So if you're taking Todd Gurley, I recommend highly that you take Malcolm Brown. Now, I know people have been touting Henderson, Darnell Henderson, but
Something like that, yeah.
I think it's really Malcolm Brown who is Gurley's backup. If you read a lot of the projections, right, people think that Todd Gurley is going to have a decreased workload this season. Now, if you look at how he produced last season, he played in 14 games and had over 300 touches in those 14 games. The average is out to like 27, 28, 29 touches per game. I think his workload is going to probably decrease this year, but he's still going to be touching the ball 20 times a game. But that opens up an opportunity for there to be 10 touches to go somewhere else. I think early on in the season, while Gurley's still healthy, you're going to see Brown and Henderson both get probably a pretty even split. Malcolm Brown's going to be the guy that steps in because the coaching staff does trust him in some of those pass protection situations. But if Gurley goes down, Brown is the guy to own because of the fact that the coaches trust him in those situations. You look at the fact that Malcolm Brown has not recorded a single stat this preseason. Why is that? Because players that are healthy, that already have a defined role on the offense, don't play in the preseason. Brown's the number 2. Henderson is a great talent, don't get me wrong, but Brown's the number 2 in this offense. The next guy I want to talk about is the Chiefs' Darwin Thompson. He's an athletic freak who should see some playing time in this committee that Andy Reid has already talked about. And with the fact that Williams has shown a history of being injury prone, Darwin Thompson could take over by probably midseason as the number one running back. There's already some rumors being floated around that Carlos Hyde's going to be cut. He's on the roster bubble. So it only makes sense that Darwin Thompson is the beneficiary there. He's played really well this preseason. I really like Darwin Thompson. If you can get him in the 11th or later, great value. Another guy I want to talk about is Jaguars Raquel Armstead.
That's easy for you to say, huh?
Yeah, right. He's Leonard Fournette's backup for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's very athletic, should see some playing time with the forever injured Leonard Fournette being the number one in that offense.
And if you go back and listen to some of our past shows, which you can, our YouTube channel, you'll know that Leonard Fournette's a guy that's 100% likely going to get hurt this year. So it's definitely worth looking at to get his backup here. And if you look at the snap count in the preseason, it's pretty clearly shown that Fournette's the one and Armstead's the number two so far.
So far, yeah. I'm putting my over under at 60% of the games played that Fournette, or of the games this season that Fournette's going to be in. Over under set at 11. So
I'm taking the over. He's not making that many.
You think Fournette's going to play over 11 games this season?
No, I mean under, way under. He'll play like 5.
Nice. So moving right along, I want to talk about another guy that's very injury prone. Hasn't finished a full season yet in his NFL career, and that is the Vikings' Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, he's a phenomenal talent. Love the guy. I've got him drafted in 2 out of my 4 leagues. I have him on my roster, but I have handcuffed him with none other than Alexander Madison. Madison is a guy who has shown throughout the preseason already that he's able to make those big gains. He's able to catch the ball consistently. He's got good hands. He's got good vision. He's just an all-around back, and he's going to step into that role of Latavius Murray had last season when Dalvin Cook went down. So I like Alexander Madison. Look for him in 11, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. You want to make sure you grab him, though, if you have Dalvin Cook on your roster. And this last guy has been one that's really flown under the radar. I haven't heard much talk about him at all this offseason, and that is the Tennessee Titans' Dion Lewis. I think he holds some, especially in PPR leagues, I think he holds some standalone value, as well as he's the handcuff to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, of course, had that huge weeks 14, 15, 16 last year. But people seem to forget that before week 14, he was rushing for 32, 34, 45. He didn't have a big game until that big breakout game in week 14 where he went for over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. So it's kind of what do you want to call a recency bias that Derrick Henry has going on where that hasn't been drafted in the 3rd and 4th rounds this year. I'm liking Dion Lewis in the 13th or better round, and so you get that value with the fact that with a guy that may be the starter come week 2. So that's just kind of some of my backup running backs and handcuffs that I think you need to grab this year.
I like it. And just to put a neat little bow on this whole thing, and you did a great job explaining all that, is it talking again about strategy. So however you're drafting on value, you might get towards the end of the draft and you're, oh crap, I don't have that many running backs. Go grab some of these guys. There's a chance that some of them could start at some point. So these are the guys, if you need running backs, grab these. Or if you need handcuffs, grab these.
Yeah, just like if Bam's prediction comes true and Leonard Fournette isn't playing after week 5, you've got Raquel Armstead ready to go.
And if I may tighten that bow just a little more to give a good analogy, it's like the starters for these guys are your real friends that you go to lunch with. And then these backups are like your little side friends that you do weird stuff with. So you got to have your real friends there that you go to lunch with, and then you can have your fake buddies that you have a beer with on occasion. That's you got to look at it that way.
These are the guys you play Dungeons and Dragons with, and you don't want your friends to know about.
Exactly. These are the ones you don't want your friends to know about. Your real friends when you go to lunch with them.
Nice, nice. So just to kind of wrap this whole segment up, let's talk about some of the other guys that we really like. If you want to hear more about them, check out our other shows available on our YouTube channels. Some of those guys are wide receiver Kenny Stills from the Miami Dolphins. ADP is 14th round. A guy that I had as a sleeper earlier on, he's kind of falling
No
out of
longer a sleeper. No longer.
kind of falling out of that sleeper category, but I'm still extremely high on. I'm projecting a top 10 finish for Mr. D.D. Westbrook. Can be gotten now. His ADP has really risen over the past week or so. He's now a week ago you could get him in the 11th round, and now his ADP is in the 8th round. So a guy really raising up people's boards. But I started that. I was on him when he was.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. Excuse me. You heard it here first.
That's right. And then, of course, wide receiver Deshaun Hamilton. Bam is extremely high on him. He can be gotten in the 15th round of your draft. That's going to end this segment. We appreciate you tuning in. Please hit that like and subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Goodbye.